Well, one and done yet again. 8 years in a row, the Steelers have not won a playoff game. We'll try to be a little more optimistic than this, but welcome. Chris Halicke here, Greg Macafee, Matt Williamson. What's going on, fellas? How you doing?
Good, man.
Good. It's a Friday.
It is a Friday. We should be happy. We should be happy. It is Friday, end of the work week. Of course, those of us who work in this industry, it's not really, we don't ever stop working really, but either way, the Steelers are done playing football. And that's due to a 28-14 loss in Baltimore. The defense did not show out the way I think any of us thought it would. 299 yards rushing by the Ravens. I think that is the stat that really stands out to me from that loss. But let's just start with our takeaways, Matt, on this game. What went wrong? I mean, you could go on the defensive side of the ball with the number of yards they gave up. Offensive side only having 59 yards at halftime. There's just so much to pick apart. Just what were your takeaways from that game?
Yeah, pretty embarrassing for basically everyone involved, and not to excuse any of it away, but I do think wild card weekend across the league is becoming less and less competitive. That these teams that are still hanging around, especially now that they've gone to 7 playoff teams, that there's never going to be 14 legit playoff teams out there. There's probably about 6, and they're all out there. And Houston didn't have to face the Bills, Chiefs, or Ravens, so they're still floating, I mean, I think that's part of it, is there's a big line behind the 5 or 6 great teams, Eagles, Lions, those 3 I mentioned. That being said, this was very poor by 90% of the Steelers involved, and I'm talking about grounds crew, coaches, equipment guy, everybody involved. And the thing I keep coming back to, though, is some of it was correctable. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I urge everyone to check out a podcast I did, my DK podcast a couple days ago.
It was very good.
It was remarkable. And it was really, really frustrating that the Ravens, without Zay Flowers, I saw it today, they played 8 snaps with 3 receivers on the field. And the Steelers still were in nickel almost 50% of their snaps. And they had 22% with a 6th offensive lineman. That doesn't even count Ricard, who's a 7th offensive lineman, and all the tight ends on there. And to be honest, when the Steelers had 3 or 4 defensive backs on the field, they held them to under 4.2 yards per play. When they had 5, it was like 9-5. It was guarding Shaq with a point guard in the post.
That's a good way.
And easily correctable.
Yeah, it's whenever I listened to that podcast you did earlier, it was remarkable to hear that information. It's just the coaching down the stretch, and I think and we'll get into the coaching. Don't worry, we'll get into that. Probably next segment, but the coaching down the stretch, the coaching decisions, the game plan going into the loss to Cincinnati in the season finale, the coaching in this game, some of the decisions that were made, whether it be, what personnel is going to be on the field, whether that be packages or players even.
Yeah, right.
Lots of questionable decisions there. And Greg, I'm curious to see anything that stood out to you, because I've got my thing that stood out to me. And it's going to be something that I'm going to keep harping on, and I'm going to harp on pretty much all off season. But I'll let you give your 2 cents on it first.
I think Matt kind of hit on it there a little bit. But if we're talking about the Ravens game, we're talking each of the 3 matchups this season. Going into the matchups, the focus was on 8 and 22, stopping those 2 guys, and they did anything but in this matchup down in Baltimore. I think Derrick Henry finished with 182 yards maybe, or something like that. And Lamar Jackson had, I think, 81 yards on the ground. And so when the 2 guys you're going to focus on the most end up doing that type of thing, something's wrong with the game plan. Something's wrong with the approach heading into the game. And they didn't do much of anything executing wise, and it was 21-0, and they were down before the game really even started at halftime. So it was just bad all the way around, and it just looked like, I mean, I know there was some comments made on the broadcast about there wasn't any fight or anything like that, and it kind of looked like it on the field. It just looked like they had no answer. And by the time they were, down 3 scores, the game was over pretty much.
Yeah, I don't know if I share the whole thing, the Kirk Herbstreit impression or opinion of there being no fight. I was in that locker room after the game, and I will say it was a weird locker room. Some guys were taking that loss hard. They were sitting there just melancholy, depressed, really just pissed off that they had just lost that game. Some guys were kind of acting like it was the last day of school, like it was locker clean out day already. And it was just kind of like, I feel like you should be taking this loss a little bit more hard than you are. I mean, this is yet another playoff loss. And you see first year guys like Patrick Queen come in, and first year with the Steelers, obviously. And he said, I think it was after the loss to the Chiefs on Christmas, that when he takes the field, he thinks about Cam Hayward. He thinks about TJ Watt. He thinks about those guys who haven't won. And that's remarkable to me. It's not like he's a Steeler lifer or anything like that. He was around here. Yeah. He was a Raven for 4 years, and he comes in and he's thinking about those guys. He's not thinking about his own career. He's thinking about that. And that to me was the, those are the type of players this team needs. And obviously you can critique Patrick Queen's play. And granted, he played that game with a terrible case of the flu and reportedly needed 4 IV bags before he even took the field. So
I knew some people that were on the field next to him and said he came off the field and threw up like every time. I mean, like he had no business being out there, and he wasn't the only ill one. Like, I guess even in the locker room, Najee came up to give him a hug, and he's like, "Get away from me, you're gonna get sick." And he played like it.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And he still had 10 tackles though. I mean, still had 10 tackles playing like that. I remember going up to him in the locker room, and I just gave him a pat on his shoulders. He was still wearing his shoulder pads, and he just gave me this look, and I was like, "You good?" He said, "I'm terribly sick." I'm like,
"I'm far from good."
I'll get away from you, Pat, but I appreciate it. Hope you feel better. Here, let's go ahead and change gears because the one thing that I was going to say, it's actually probably reserved for what changes need to be made. And so we'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to try to dissect and figure out what the heck this team can do, in order to try to change things or to get actually closer to being a contender. Some things we already know that aren't going to change. And we'll get into all that too. So we'll be right back right after this.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
Okay, so we all know that Mike Tomlin's not going anywhere. He is going to remain the head coach. So we can sit here, we can complain about it, we can other words that I can't say on the show about it. But the fact of the matter is that he's not going anywhere. So what changes can be made? What changes are feasible? The one thing, I'll kick this off because the Steelers need a quarterback.
Yeah,
it's low hanging fruit, but it's also just the truth. I've brought this number up a number of times on this show. I've brought it up on the site, and I'll continue to bring it up because it continues to ring true, especially when you see what teams are left in the playoffs. Nearly 75% of the teams that have won a Super Bowl had a quarterback that is either already in the Hall of Fame or will undoubtedly be in the Hall of Fame. I'm talking about
Sure.
Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger,
mhm.
Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, those guys who, like, their case has already been made. They will be in the Hall of Fame. It's not a question. That obviously does not count Joe Flacco. That doesn't count Trent Dilfer or Jim McMahon or any of those guys.
And I think Lamar and Allen are going if they win this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because Lamar's could probably win a third MVP.
Right.
And Josh Allen would be the quarterback that leads the Bills to their first Super Bowl. Like, yeah.
They're on those paces
yeah.
at least.
Yeah.
Minimum,
But
right?
the fact of the matter is that you need a quarterback. You just do. You look at the teams that are left, most of them have a legitimate franchise quarterback. And until this team gets one, and this is a terrible year for them to try to find one, but until this team gets one, I have a hard time believing that they can be a legitimate contender. The only exception to the rule there would be to figure things out on defense and make that defense the absolute best in the league. That would be the only way to possibly counterpunch at all in terms of not having a quarterback. That's also been the biggest exception to the rule down the stretch, or not down the stretch, but in the history of the game. When you talk about the 85 Bears and the 2000 Ravens and the 02 Buccaneers, like, those teams didn't have great quarterbacks, but they had elite all-time great defenses. And so that's the only exception to the rule. And right now the Steelers don't really have any. They had the personnel on the defense to do it. Anyway, I'll kick it to you, Matt. What's some change that could possibly happen here that the Steelers that would benefit the Steelers and try to make them a bit of a contender this year? Because I think we all know, but just based off the free agency class and the draft class, the quarterback is most likely not going to happen this spring.
Yeah, and I'm going to use the joke I've been using since they got eliminated. You know, like, I'm sure you guys have been asked this 1,000 times too, and I have on many outlets. And you know, I kind of come back to, well, they were eliminated by Lamar this year. They were eliminated by Allen last year. They were eliminated by Mahomes the year before. So just get one of them, you know?
Yeah.
Sure. You know, and
that makes it easy.
You're right. And frankly, that is a really disheartening but true statement. I mean, you almost need, like, I'd rather be the Bengals than the Steelers because they do have one of them.
They do,
even though the rest of the roster is really, really bad. You know, but that's the hardest thing to find.
Yeah.
Right, the hardest thing to find. At least they have. Now they have other issues, but that being said, so I think this is a dreadful year to get a quarterback, and we could talk about what you do at quarterback. But I'm kind of leaning towards let's get two other things set for now.
Mm-hmm.
You can't average 4 yards a carry. You can't. I mean, you're going to be a high volume offense or running team. That's not going to change. Even if Pat Mahomes falls out of the sky, you're still not going to lead the league in passing attempts. I mean, we just know that's true. So this has to go up to 4-2, 4-3. I'm not talking about 6-0 and leading the league or anything crazy.
4.5 yards a carry should be the bare minimum expectation.
Right.
Yeah.
And a different back that fits the system would help. A year older on the O-line. I don't think that's a crazy thing to ask. Here's the thing, though, I think that, and I'm not even saying this will help them win the Super Bowl next year, but I also don't think this is that hard to find. If you can give me basically this same defense, which is going to be back, and I'm not trading Watt and Minka and Hayward, and we know they're not either, by the way, folks. So let's be realistic. I need a corner opposite Porter that's give or take his equal, and a slot, but we can find slot corners in the 3rd round or 4th round or off the street or whatever. But with that corner, and I don't think it's Trice, but I want him in the mix as well. Maybe it is Trice. I don't know. And here's my logic is we're going to lead the league in sacks because we should. It's kind of our God-given birthright.
Yeah.
And we have the best pass rushers in the league. And I'm done bringing 4. I mean, I'm bringing 6. Yeah. I'm bringing 7. I want this to look like Flores' defense. I want this to look like Blitzburg. I don't want TJ to get doubled and tripled every snap. And I need one more corner to pull that off. And Queen's a good blitzer. And Roberts is a good blitzer. And Wilson's a good blitzer. And I think their safeties can be good blitzers. And Chase might shrug off Porter and take it to the house once a game. But Burrow might not finish the game.
Right.
We're going to lead the league in sacks.
Yeah, and there was a run there where the Steelers were leading the league in sacks. I think it was
6 years
like,
in a row.
Yeah, I mean they were constantly at the top, and as
they might have better pass rushers now than then.
Right, and so
but you drop 7 and play cover 3 and only bring 4. You're not going to lead the league in sacks.
So what does that require, Greg? Does that require a change of defensive coordinator? Does that require just Tomlin? Regardless of who the defensive coordinator is, Tomlin just saying, you know what, screw this, it's not been working. We're going to change our schematics on defense. What has to happen in order to get this defense to be a better pass rushing team?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about it a lot since the end of the season, and we've started with Tomlin needs to be open to changing, and I think you asked him about it in the the end of season press conference, Chris, of what's going to lead to you actually changing, or what's going to lead you to adopting or adapting to the modern NFL, and it's figuring out when things aren't working and changing them. And I think they were one of the lowest. I think they had one of the lowest blitz percentages in the league this year. They were bringing 4 often. I mean, they have the personnel to get after the quarterback, and they just weren't doing it. But I think it's maybe too much reliance on the talent that they have and not supporting that talent. And so, I mean, it's a change of philosophy. It could be a change of coordinator. It could be a number of different things. I don't think there's just one thing that can solve that problem. I mean, they could keep Terrell Austin on and say, all right, we're going to change our philosophy. We're going to do things this way. We're going to, support our blitz. We're going to support our pass rushers. And then we're going to depend on our corners on the back end.
Yeah. Chris, I'll take it a little step further too, is that if I think a big key is everyone wants to only rush 4 and drop 7. Boy, isn't that the luxury all the defense coordinators want? Yeah, fine. The answer really is no, though, because if you look at, there's a line of demarcation before the losing streak. If you look at those offenses per EPA, that was the easiest stretch of offenses in the entire league. Yeah. And then from that point on, it was the hardest stretch of offenses the entire league. So, yeah, I can wreak havoc with Watton, Highsmith, and Hayward against the Raiders. Sure. I can't against the Chiefs.
Yeah. It just goes back to adjusting to who you're playing and, the schemes you're going up against.
Yeah, for sure. One potential change, and I think there's going to be change here either way, whether they want to or not. Grady Brown, the news broke today that he's going to be interviewing for the Falcons defensive coordinator position. And I even said in my Friday Insider, I wrote that he's one of the more prominent secondary coaches in the league. I even got some pushback saying, like, have you seen this secondary? Blah, blah. I'm like, and then lo and behold, later on, same day, he's getting an interview for a DC job elsewhere. And so I don't think you can let him go. I think he's one of the better coaches on their staff. When you look at what he's done, he's been a big part of the Steelers getting better at taking the ball away, which they were still one of the better teams in terms of taking the ball away again this year. And if he can, I think if you're kind of put over a barrel there, if Grady Brown has a really good interview and says, hey, they offered me the job, but I'd rather stay here, but you got to at least match, I move on from Terrell Austin and I would make Grady Brown the defensive coordinator. That might be kind of a knee-jerk reaction, but I think that would be a big loss in the coaching staff. And to be completely honest, I do think that maybe the thing that needs to happen when you're talking about a pretty drastic change in terms of philosophy on defense, not that it'll be that big of a change because it's still Mike Tomlin and he's still a defensive head coach, but still could use a better defensive coordinator or at least a different defensive coordinator. So Matt, is that way off base? Do you think think Grady Brown would be
Austin's contract is up. I don't think he's going to be back.
Oh no, he's got 1 year left. He's got.
Either way, you could get rid of him though. Okay, you're on top of that more than I am. And I'll be the first to admit, commenting on assistant coaches is really, really hard. You know, I've been in those buildings. Sometimes you're like, how did this guy get his job? Like, if he was not the tight end coach, he'd be mowing my lawn, you know, like,
right.
But sometimes it's like, wow, I mean, this guy's a future head coach. He's super impressive. Like, I was at the Browns and Todd Bowles was our assistant D-back coach. He was a young pup. And I'm like, this guy's awesome, you know. Yeah. Anyway, but I'm with you. I would gladly bump Brown from assistant coach to coordinator. But I also think there's another thing at play here that's also attractive is he, as well as their director of pro scouting, I forget his name off the top of my head, but he is interviewing for a GM job.
Sheldon White.
Sheldon White, yeah.
Both of whom are minorities.
Mm-hmm.
If they get those jobs, you get a third-round pick for both guys.
Correct. Actually, for Sheldon White, they would get 2 third-round picks, 1 in 25 and 1 in 26. Yeah.
And they could use it. Like, I don't know if I like Brown enough to say Brown minus the third-round pick and go outside the organization for a defensive coordinator.
Well,
third-round picks are nice. I like third-round picks a lot.
Third-round picks are really nice for sure. Yeah. And I'm not saying that, like, if Grady Brown leaves, like, the world's going to come to an end. And yes, I do think that there is the possibility, and should be at least a possibility, of going and getting an experienced defensive coordinator, somebody who knows how to get after the quarterback. So I don't think that
might tell Tomlin, no, I'm doing it my way. You know, right? That's been around the block. Like, I'm not talking about like Vic Fangio, but I mean, like, somebody that's been around the block.
Yeah,
we want Brown to get offered that job no matter what, though.
Yeah, because
White for that matter. Yeah,
right. It could spark change without the Steelers even wanting to change. Even if the biggest,
it's only a third-round pick back, great,
right? Yeah, and so Greg, I'm curious for anything else that you have. Is there anything else that you want to see, whether it be a certain position that needs to be addressed, whether it's a certain coaching change or anything that needs to happen? Because I do think that, like, even when you look at the roster, I mean, there's a number of different places that they need to address, whether it be in free agency or the draft or both.
Yeah, I mean, I love them to obviously take a look at the wide receiver room. I think that's low hanging fruit. I mean, it's something that they've needed to address all season long. Obviously, I like George. I think he's a solid producer. I don't think you can go away from him. I think you keep him. But I've also liked, like, Calvin Austin. I like him as a receiver, but he's not a number 2. He's a good guy out of the slot. I think Roman Wilson can 3. Yeah. And I think Roman Wilson can contribute in that spot as well, but they need to go out and get a number 2, a true number 2, whether that's in free agency or trying through the draft. Obviously there's been a lot of talk around T. Higgins. I'd really like Chris Godwin and things like that. Yeah, I know. It's a stretch, but you know, those are just some names. And then
I wouldn't be shocked though if they spent money on a corner and a receiver.
Yeah.
I mean, like real money, you know, like DJ Reed, Godwin, Devontae Adams, you know.
I did see a report though that Chris Godwin, if they can't work out a contract, that they're going to be franchise tagged.
Yeah,
so,
right. I mean, it's a bad receiver free agent class, by the way. But Byron Murphy. I mean, like there's guys you could spend on those positions.
Yeah, and I do think Mike Tomlin likes T. Higgins, and so I think if Tomlin goes to Omar Khan and he's like, I don't care what he costs, get him here, you know.
Now you're cooking.
Yeah, I mean,
Devontae Adams.
Right, and Devontae Adams I mean, he even said on some show this week that he would 100% play for Tomlin. And so now, does that mean you trade George Pickens? Does that mean you're okay with acquiring Devontae Adams and signing T. Higgins? I mean, to me, that's a good receiver room. If you have Devontae Adams, T. Higgins, Calvin Austin, and Roman Wilson, I'll take that receiver room all day. But if I
signed a legit receiver, I would entertain offers for Pickens, especially on draft day, because you know, maybe your first round pick is also a receiver. You move on from Pickens and your first rounder is the Ohio State kid and you have Adams, you know, like, okay, that spaces out our money, you know, that type of thing. Or if you're crappy at the trade deadline, you'll get a lot for Pickens too. You know, like, I don't know that he has to go now if you're trading him.
No, I'm not saying they have to to trade him and, you know, before free agency or anything like that. But I think it's definitely something to watch for. this offseason. I do think the organization is getting a little tired of everything
Nonsense.
nonsense is a good word for it. And so it would not surprise me if George Pickens has played his last snap in the Steelers uniform. So that's one change for sure. I do think,
but then you have to add 2.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, you can't just add 1, because then you'd be in the same situation they were in last year. Only instead of Pickens, you have Higgins or Adams or somebody else. Yeah, you still need it. Yeah, you need 2 guys. Running back has to be addressed. I do think the draft is a better place to get one. Not saying you can't go
place to get them.
Yeah, it's a really good running back class. I like a number of. Obviously the kid from North Carolina. I don't know if you quite want to get him in the first round. Maybe you trade down and get him near the end of the first round. I don't know.
Crazy deep running back.
Yeah, you don't have to get one that early. I think either one of the Ohio State running backs are good. So yeah, it's a good class, and it's a good time to be able to address a couple of big needs. You could go receiver, corner, or corner receiver, or maybe even get one of the better interior. The I forget the guy's name from Ohio State, the interior lineman.
D lineman.
Yes, yeah,
interior. Very good D tackle class. It's a great running back class. I'd love to fish in those waters.
100%. Especially, Hayward's going to be another year older. Is Larry Ogunjobi going to be cut?
I think so.
Yeah, and so
I'd like Benton to go to the Ogunjobi role and find a nose. Right?
100%. Okay, there's a change I think we can all agree on. That Keanu Benton coming out of college could play nose tackle at Wisconsin. He can't play nose tackle in the NFL, and I think even watching him at the Senior Bowl that year, that was 2 years ago now, I remember watching him and thinking he just looks like a gigantic 3-tech. That's just what he looks like. He looks like a huge 3-tech, and put him in that role. Have your 2 pillars up front be Cam Hayward and Keanu Benton, and then draft another guy who could be the third guy, or could essentially play a little closer inside, whether it be a 0 or 1, whatever it is. But I think that there are a number of different positions, and I think running back should be one that I think is drafted probably no later than the 4th round. I think you could get a really good running back in this.
You'll be happy with them.
100%. And somebody who can split carries with Jaylen Warren too. And I also wouldn't mind getting a cheap vet. I don't think like J.K. Dobbins would fit that role. He's probably going to get a pretty good contract, but
there'll be a guy late in free agency that's been on the block that can pick up the blitz, and
right. Not Cordero Patterson, by the way.
No. Nope.
All right. Any last thoughts as we kind of tie a bow on the 2024 Steelers season? Matt,
let's talk quarterbacks next week, because obviously that's way more. We could have got that's another half hour.
Right. Oh yeah. I just remember, I just put it in our Steelers feed on DKPittsburghSports.com, and I put the top 10 betting favorites, and the list is just depressing.
Right.
Where I do think, actually, we'll get more into it next week, but I think Justin Fields might be the best name on that list.
I'm leaning that way too, for numerous reasons. But that's a teaser.
Yeah. All right. So we'll end it on that note. We'll dive into the quarterbacks next week. So until then, everybody, try to enjoy life. There are things more important than football. That is my biggest message that I could give. Enjoy. We've had snow on the ground for like 3 weeks in Pittsburgh, but either way, enjoy life. We'll see you guys next week. Catch you on the Flippity Flip.